You ever have one of those moments where you're just casually scrolling through your feed, minding your business, maybe looking at memes, watching somebody's dog attempt and fail to jump onto a couch, and then you see a post from someone you actually know, not some random egg account with numbers in the username, not some blue check rage merchant. No, I'm talking about somebody you've had cookouts with, laughed with, maybe gone to church with, maybe trusted around your kids. A quote-unquote nice person. You know the type. Polite, friendly, always says yes ma'am and no sir. Probably brings a casserole to every social function whether you asked for one or not. And then you read their post, and you just kind of stare at your phone. Not angry, just exhausted. Because the post is about the Super Bowl halftime show, or the culture, or quote-unquote real America, or how this country is going downhill fast. And suddenly this person you thought was just a regular, decent human being is kind of talking like the FBI just raided their house because a Puerto Rican artist sang in Spanish for 12 minutes. And I just sit there looking at my phone like, son, not even mad, just disappointed. Because apparently all it takes to shake some people's entire sense of national identity is one halftime show that does not look exactly like them. Suddenly, everyone's a cultural historian. Suddenly, everybody's got a strong opinion about what is and isn't real America. Good people don't decide that real America only looks like them. Pasty white, sunburns if they walk past a window, and still cannot pronounce the word quesadilla without sounding like they're asking the pharmacist for help. Yeah, doc, I think I got a bad case of the quesadilla. Started flaring up after Taco Tuesday. And the thing that really got me was realizing some of these takes were not coming from obvious racists. They were coming from people who, up until this week, I would have described as good folks, nice people, decent neighbors, kind coworkers, the kind of people who would absolutely help you move a couch. But apparently, if the wrong culture shows up on the wrong stage at the wrong time, that kindness has some pretty strict conditions. And that got me thinking. How many people out there think they're good people, but the second the spotlight shifts to someone who doesn't look just like them, or talk like them, or hell, even worship like them, they suddenly start sounding like a Facebook comment section from 2009. So today's episode, it's not really about the halftime show. It's about something a lot deeper than that. It's about the gap between the person we think we are and the beliefs we carry around when we think no one's really looking. Because some of y'all, you've been wearing the nice person costume for a really long time, and just one halftime show just tugged the zipper down the back. And from where I'm sitting, I'm just the internet's disappointed dad, and we need to have a talk. Cue the music. Hey, and welcome to, or welcome back to, the Average Joe Nerdcast. I'm Nate, your resident Average Joe, part-time nostalgia dealer, full-time controller untangler, and apparently, the internet's disappointed dad this week. If this is your first time tuning in, this is the show where we talk about the stuff that shaped us, the stories that stuck with us, and occasionally, the cultural nonsense that makes me rub my temples like a man who just found out his kid tried to microwave a Pop-Tart while it was still in the wrapper. Because sometimes the internet doesn't need a debate lord, it doesn't need a think piece, and it doesn't even need a hot take. Sometimes It just needs a dad to step in, cross his arms, look around the room, and go, all right, what are we doing here? And that's kind of the energy today. Because over the past few weeks, I've seen some takes from people I actually know that made me feel like I just walked into the living room and caught somebody trying to explain why the dog deserved to be grounded. Just logic that falls apart the second you touch it. So today's episode is about something much bigger than a halftime show. It's about the weird, uncomfortable reality that some people can be incredibly kind, polite, and friendly on the surface and still carry beliefs that are mean, exclusionary, or straight up ugly underneath. So we're going to talk about why that happens, what psychology says about it, why certain cultural moments bring it out, and why some folks only feel comfortable when America looks just like they do. I promise no screaming, no political jargon, and no debate bro energy. Just a calm, clear, slightly disappointed dad voice saying, son, you might need to rethink some shit. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and if you're one of the good ones, then you've got nothing to worry about. But if this episode makes you feel a little called out, well, maybe that's the point. You ever notice how the people who say the wildest stuff online are rarely the people you'd expect? I'm not talking about the obvious ones, not the guy whose profile picture is him in Oakley's, a truck selfie, and a quote about lions not caring about the opinions of sheep. We already know what time it is with that guy. I'm talking about the ones who, up until 5 minutes ago, were just normal, friendly. The how's the family type. The let me grab that door for you type. The always remembers your kid's birthday type. The casserole class. You know exactly who I'm talking about. These are the people who smile at you in the grocery store, wave when you drive by, post thoughts and prayers anytime something bad happens, have at least one wall decoration in their house that says live, laugh, love in cursive. And yeah, on paper, they're good people. And to be fair, in a lot of day-to-day situations, they really are. They're not out here burning crosses, they're not screaming slurs at strangers, and they're not marching around in white hoods. They're just regular folks trying to live their lives. But then something really strange happens. A cultural moment. A movie, a casting choice, a halftime show, a commercial, a history lesson, a pride flag, a Spanish song on a big stage. And suddenly that same person who helped you move a couch 3 years ago is in your comments talking about, this isn't real America. Why are they forcing this on us? What happened to traditional values? And why can't they just speak English? And you're just sitting there like, where did that even come from? Because last week you were posting pictures of your grandkids at the pumpkin patch. Now you sound like you're one bad news cycle away from yelling at a cloud. And the truth is, this version of racism, this version of prejudice, doesn't look like what we were taught growing up. You know, when we were kids, racism had a very specific look. It was the burning crosses, the segregated water fountains, the white hoods, the angry mobs, people shouting slurs and black and white footage from the 60s. That was the clear villain. That was the monster. And we were all taught a very comforting story. Those were the bad people. And we're not like that anymore. So now a lot of people have this mental image of what a racist is supposed to look like. And in their mind, a racist is loud, violent, obvious, cartoonishly evil. Basically one step away from a history textbook villain. So as long as they're not that, then they must be a good person, right? Because they don't use slurs. They don't hate anyone personally. They've got black coworkers. They've got a Latino guy at work they're cool with. They like that one Asian restaurant down the street. So in their head, the math checks out. I'm polite. I'm friendly. I go to church every Sunday, and I'd never hurt anybody. So I can't possibly be racist. But here's the uncomfortable part. Racism in 2026 doesn't usually look like a burning cross. It looks like discomfort. It kind of looks like, well, I just don't think that belongs here. Why are they making everything about race? I'm tired of this stuff being shoved down my throat. That's not the America I grew up in. No slurs, no violence. Just a quiet belief that some people and some cultures are more normal and more American than all the others. And that belief usually sits there quietly. It doesn't cause any problems as long as the world looks the way you're used to. As long as the music sounds familiar, the language is the one you speak. The heroes on TV look just like you. The stories center people just like you. The traditions feel like your traditions. Everything's fine. You can be kind, you can be polite, you can be generous. Because the world isn't challenging your idea of who belongs at the center of it. But then, something shifts. A movie stars someone different. A commercial shows a mixed-race couple. A history lesson includes people you were never taught about. A halftime show features a Puerto Rican artist singing in Spanish. And suddenly, that quiet belief inside starts to itch. It starts to feel just a little uncomfortable. Like someone rearranged the furniture in your living room without ever asking for permission. And instead of going, maybe the world is bigger than I ever thought it was, some people go, no, this is wrong. This isn't real America. And that's the moment where the mask slips. Because you see, it reveals something important. Their kindness, well, it had boundaries. It was real, sure, but it only existed inside a very specific version of the world. A version where they were the default. Their culture was the norm. Their language was the standard. Their traditions were the baseline definition of American. And the second that definition expands, the second someone else gets the spotlight. And suddenly, the kindness comes with terms and conditions. And that's the part that hits different. Because it means some of the nicest people you know aren't actually as open-hearted as they think they are. They're just comfortable. And comfort isn't the same thing as goodness. And the wild part is, a lot of these people genuinely believe they're good people. They're not sitting around plotting how to be racist. They're not twirling mustaches in a dark room going, yes, how can I oppress minorities today? You see, in their mind, they're fair, moral, decent, respectful, not one of those people. And psychology actually has a term for this. It's called aversive racism. Now, don't let the name scare you off. It's not some complicated academic buzzword. It's actually a really simple idea. You see, aversive racism describes people who believe in equality in theory. They see themselves as fair-minded, and they think of themselves as good, moral people. But they still carry discomfort, bias, or negative assumptions about certain groups of people. Not because they consciously hate anyone, but because of the media they grew up with, the history they were taught, the neighborhoods they lived in, the jokes they heard, the stereotypes they absorbed without even realizing they were absorbing them. It's like background noise in your brain. You didn't choose the station, but it's been playing your entire life. So now you've got two ideas living in your head at the same exact time. Idea number one, I'm a good person. I believe everyone should be treated equally. And idea number two, I feel weird when I hear Spanish at the Super Bowl. I don't like when movies change the race of a character. I think the country is changing way too fast. I just wish things were like they used to be. And those two ideas don't really fit together. So your brain has to do something to make the math work. Because nobody wants to wake up in the morning and think, wow, I might actually be kind of racist. That's not really a comfortable thought. So instead, the brain goes into self-defense mode. It starts building little excuses, little justifications, little stories that let you keep your good person identity intact. Things like, well, it's not about race, it's about tradition. It's not racist, it's just not what I'm used to. Why does everything have to be political nowadays? I just think America should stay American. Do you notice how none of those sentences use the word race, but they all orbit around it? And you see, that's the trick. Because if you can frame your discomfort as tradition, culture, patriotism, standards, or values, then you don't have to confront the deeper question. Why does this bother me so much? And this is why moments like a Puerto Rican halftime show become such a big deal to some people. Because it forces that internal contradiction out into the open. On one hand, I'm a good, fair, decent American. And on the other, I don't like seeing this culture on this stage. So the brain has to resolve that tension. And instead of questioning the belief, it questions the culture. It goes, well, maybe this isn't real America. Maybe this is being forced on us. Maybe this is political. Maybe this is disrespectful. Because if the performance is the problem, then you don't have to be. And that's how a perfectly nice person ends up sharing a post about how the real halftime show is some dude in a leather vest sponsored by a political organization. Not because they woke up that day and chose hate, but because something about that moment made them uncomfortable. And they'd rather defend their comfort than question their assumptions. And that's where the disappointed dad part of me kicks in. Because this isn't about perfection. Nobody grows up in a vacuum. We all absorb stuff. We all carry biases. And we all have blind spots. That's just being human. But what separates a truly good person from someone just playing dress up in the nice person costume is what they do when those blind spots get exposed. A good person goes, why did that bother me? Maybe I should think about that. But a not so good person goes, no, I'm not the problem. The world is. And that's the fork in the road. That's the moment where kindness either grows or it turns into something a lot uglier with a very polite smile on its face. And that polite smile version of ugliness usually shows up in one very specific kind of way. It shows up in conversations about what is and isn't real America. You'll hear it in phrases like, that's not the America I grew up in. This country is losing its whole identity. We need to get back to our roots. That's not a real American halftime show. And on the surface, that all sounds pretty harmless. It sounds like nostalgia, like tradition, like somebody just missing the way things used to be. But here's the uncomfortable question that no one wants to ask out loud. What exactly did real America look like in your mind? Because when you start pulling on that thread, the answer usually isn't about values. It's all about visuals. It's not about freedom or opportunity, democracy, hard work, or community. It's all about language, skin tone, religion, music, food, names, or accents. It's about who feels normal and who feels like a guest. And that becomes really obvious when you look at reactions to different halftime performers over the years. Because the Super Bowl has had British bands, Irish rock stars, Canadian pop singers, Australian performers, all kinds of artists from all over the world. And no one panicked. No one was online posting, this isn't real America. Why are we letting foreigners take over the halftime show? Where are the American values? Nobody saw a British guy singing in a leather jacket and thought, wow, the Republic is in danger. But let the performer be, I don't know, Puerto Rican, Black, Latino, speaking entirely Spanish, representing a different culture, and suddenly it's a nationwide crisis. Suddenly it's political, disrespectful, not for real Americans. It's proof the country is falling apart right in front of our eyes. And you've got to ask yourself, what changed? Because the Super Bowl didn't suddenly become international. It's always been a global event. The only real difference is who was on that stage. And more importantly, what they looked like, what they sounded like, and what culture they represented. And this is where that whole real halftime show narrative starts to get real telling. Because when some folks say, that wasn't the real halftime show, what they really mean is, that didn't feel like my America. And then, like clockwork, somebody posts, no, this is the real American halftime show. And it's a white guy singing in English, wearing denim or leather, surrounded by flags, sponsored by a political organization. And that gets framed as traditional, real, authentic, 100% American. But here's the thing. This whole thing isn't even about the artists themselves. This isn't a Bad Bunny versus Kid Rock conversation. This isn't about who's more talented, who sold more records, or whose music you personally like. This is all about symbolism. Because culturally, those two images represent very different ideas of America. One version says America is multilingual, multicultural, diverse, loud, colorful, constantly changing, built from 100 different influences. And the other version says America is one language, one culture, one aesthetic, one type of person, one narrow definition of normal. And for some people, that second version feels much safer. It feels familiar, predictable, kind of feels like home. So when the first version shows up on the biggest stage in the country, it doesn't just feel different. It feels threatening. And not because it's actually dangerous, but because it challenges the story they've been telling themselves their entire lives about what America is supposed to look like. And that's where the disappointed dad in me just kind of sighs. Because Puerto Ricans are Americans. Not kind of Americans, not basically Americans, not Americans when it's convenient. Americans, U.S. citizens. They serve in our military. They pay taxes. They vote. They work. They build communities. They raise families. They contribute to this country in every possible way. So if seeing a Puerto Rican artist on an American stage makes you feel like America is under attack, that doesn't say anything about Bad Bunny. It says a lot about your definition of America. And maybe that definition was a little too fucking small to begin with. And that's the part that really sticks with me. Because this isn't just about celebrities. It's not really about halftime shows at all. And it's not even about music. It's about people. People you know, people you grew up with, people you trust. And realizing that some of their kindness came with an invisible asterisk. It was the kind of kindness that works great in a very specific environment. A familiar one. A comfortable one. A world where the language sounds like yours. The holidays look like yours. The food smells like yours. The music feels like yours. The faces in the spotlight look like yours. And in that world, they're great. They're generous. They're warm. They're the first to offer help. They'll pray for you, cook for you, sit with you in the hospital, watch your kids, fix your fence, lend you their tools. And that's real, man. That kindness is real. But the question isn't, are they nice when everything feels familiar? The real question is, who are they when the world stops centering them? Who are they when the spotlight shifts? Who are they when the main character of the story doesn't look just like them, talk like them, or live like them? That's the real test of a person. Because you see, it's easy to be kind when nothing challenges your worldview. It's easy to be polite when the world is built around your comfort. It's easy to be generous when you still feel like you're at the top of the social ladder. But when something changes, when the culture shifts, when the stage gets shared, when the language is different, when the heroes don't all look like you anymore, that's when you really find out what kind of person you actually are. And that's why this whole moment hit so hard for me. Because it felt like watching the curtain get pulled back, like seeing behind the scenes of a character you thought you understood, and realizing, oh, so the kindness only applied inside a certain version of America? The second that version expanded, the kindness shrank. And again, this isn't about perfection. No one is asking anyone to know every culture, to speak every language, to love every kind of music, to agree with every social movement, or hell, even pretend you're the most enlightened person on the planet. Come on, that's not realistic. But there is a big difference between that's not really my thing and that doesn't belong here. One of those is personal preference, and the other one is a value judgment about entire groups of people. One says, hey, I'm just not into that. And the other says, you shouldn't exist in this space. And a lot of the reactions to this entire situation, they weren't about music. They weren't about performance quality. They weren't about stage design or about song choice. They were about presence, about who was allowed to take up space on the biggest stage in the country. And when your reaction to that is, this isn't real America, what you're really saying is people like that aren't a part of my version of America. And that's where the internet dad in me just kind of sits down, folds his hands, and takes a deep breath. Because that's the moment where I want to look at some of these folks and go, all right, kiddo, we need to have a talk. Because either you don't actually know what America is, or your definition of it leaves a whole lot of people out. And neither of those is a great look. Because the truth is, America has never been just one thing. It's always been loud. It's always been messy, always been a mix of languages, cultures, foods, music, and traditions crashing into each other and turning into something brand new. That's not a bug in the system. That is the system. And that's the entire point. So when you see that messiness on stage, when you hear a language that you don't speak, when you see a culture you didn't grow up in, and your first instinct is, this isn't America, that's not patriotism talking. That's fear. And fear has a funny way of dressing itself up like tradition. And hey, look, I get it. Change is uncomfortable. New music feels weird. New slang sounds strange. New traditions can feel completely foreign. Every generation goes through that moment where they look at the world and go, man, this doesn't feel like the place I grew up in. And that's normal. But there's a difference between feeling out of place and deciding other people don't belong. There's a difference between, well, I don't really connect with that music, and that's not real America. Because one of those is just personal taste, and the other one is a quiet little gate you're building in your mind. with a sign on it that says, "People like you, stay the fuck out." And that's where we've got to have the uncomfortable conversation. Because a lot of people love to think of themselves as good. Good neighbors, good Christians, good American, good parent, good friend. And again, maybe you are. Maybe you are kind in 1,000 different little ways. You tip your servers well, you check on your elderly neighbor, you volunteer at church, you help your buddy move, you bring soup when someone's sick. And all of that stuff, it absolutely matters. But kindness that only works when everyone looks just like you, that's not real kindness. It's just comfort. Real goodness shows up when the world gets unfamiliar, when the spotlight moves, when someone different takes center stage. That's when we find out who you actually are. And this is the part where Internet Dad has to clear his throat just a little bit, because some of y'all might not be as good of a person as you think you are. And yeah, I said it. Not because you used a slur and not because you joined a hate group, and definitely not because you're out here trying to hurt people, but because the second you saw a culture that was not yours on a big American stage, your first instinct was to say, that doesn't belong here. And if your definition of real America only includes people who look like you, talk like you, worship like you, and vote just like you do, that's not patriotism. That's just insecurity wrapped in a flag. And I know that stings just a little bit. But sometimes Dad's got to say the hard shit. Because here's the truth. Good people don't panic when someone else's culture gets a spotlight. Good people don't feel threatened by a different language. Good people don't decide that real America only looks just like them. Pasty white, sunburns in the shade, and still unable to pronounce quesadilla without sounding like they're ordering construction materials. And if hearing Spanish at the Super Bowl feels like a personal attack on your identity, then I don't think the problem is the halftime show to begin with. I think the problem is that your idea of America is way too damn small. And maybe you've been calling yourself a good person based on how you treat the people who already look and live just like you. That's not a moral victory. That's just the default setting. The real test of character is how you react when the world stops revolving around you. When the spotlight shifts. When the language changes. When the faces look different. When the story isn't about you anymore. Do you get curious? Or do you just get angry? Do you lean in? Or do you start talking about real America like it's a private club? Because if the only version of this country that feels comfortable to you is the one where everyone fits your mold, then yeah, Internet Dad's gonna say it. You might not be the good person that you think you are. And the good news is, that's fixable. You don't have to stay that way. You can learn, listen, and you can expand your definition of us. Because America was never meant to be small. It was never meant to be just one color, one accent, one culture, or one version of normal. It was always meant to be big, messy, loud, complicated, multicolored, multilingual, and constantly evolving. So maybe the question isn't, why are they changing America? Maybe the real question is, why does seeing the real America make you so uncomfortable? And look, if you made it all the way through this one with me, I appreciate you. Seriously, because I know this wasn't a light, goofy, hey, you remember when Cartoon Network was super awesome type of episode? This was more of a dad set you down at the kitchen table with a glass of sweet tea kind of conversation. And on a real life note, thanks for hanging in with me through the recording itself. I've been fighting off a cold ever since we got buried under all that snow and ice, and let me tell you, it was work getting through this one. There were a couple of moments where I was one cough away from sounding like a haunted accordion. So if my voice sounded just a little off, a little deeper, a little more gravelly than usual, that's not a new radio persona. That's just cold medicine, stubbornness, and pure dad energy carrying this episode across the finish line. But I wanted to get this one out because it's been sitting on my chest. And sometimes the show isn't just about nostalgia and neon lights and old video games. Sometimes it's about talking through the stuff that matters. And if you stuck around, listened, thought about it, maybe even got a little uncomfortable at points, then that means a lot. Because the goal here is never to shame anyone. It's to get us thinking, growing, to make sure we're actually living up to the good person label we like to give ourselves. As always, I want to give some love to the people in my life. Shout out to my player 2. Thanks for always listening to my half-formed episode ideas, my rants, my late night, what if we did this topic? Brain spirals, and still somehow encouraging me to hit record every single time. And to everyone behind the scenes, thank you. You all truly make it feel like a lobby. And if you're listening right now and you enjoy the show, here's the dad part where I point at you gently but firmly. Go ahead and follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you're currently listening. Drop a rating, leave a review if your app lets you. It helps out the show more than you think. And if you want to keep the conversation going, then please come join the private Average Joe Nerdcast Facebook group. It's a chill corner of the internet where we share memories, talk about episodes, post memes, run polls, play stupid games, and just generally hang out like it's a late night party chat. You know, like old school AOL chat rooms. I'll post a link in the episode description, or you can head on over to Facebook and in the search bar, just type Average Joe Nerdcast the lobby and you will find the page. So until next time, stay gold, nerd bold, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Game over.